Well, it's that magic hour. It's 6 o'clock on Wednesday. So I want to welcome everyone to The Dig. I can't believe this is our 10th edition of The Dig. And we have 15 consecutive weeks. This week I had probably the most wonderful compliment. I was with Dr. Bartolo. We were out in Rocky Ford at the Research Institute there. If you've never been there, it's extraordinary. It's the oldest in the state. It's been there since 1888. But there were two lovely women on the tour. This was the farm and produce tour that we went out and looked at the farms and then to the Research Institute. And these two women were just wonderful. And I started talking with them, and then one of them just literally stood and screamed, "You're Mr. Dig!" So they were going to try to come tonight, but they're going to probably come to one of the other ones. But it's been an extraordinary ride. As I mentioned last week, we've received calls from former Puebloans that live in Arkansas, Mississippi, New Jersey, Oklahoma, Wyoming, Utah, New Mexico, Texas. So whether they watched it live or whether they watch it afterwards, it's just something that's kind of comforting for them. And many come back regularly. They either have family or they've got property here. But the one thing that was really important at the outset was realizing that the two things that we can do now, we were crawling out of our pandemic caves. I hope we're not crawling back into them. But the two things that we can really do are break bread and share stories. And Pueblo has so many stories. And I've only been here 10 years, but the stories just, every time I pick up a rock, there's another great story. So first I want to give a shout out to Ken and Gina, who own the Senate. They're actually really busy getting ready for the Chili and Frijoles Festival happening later in the month. But the whole staff here has been extraordinary. So a round of applause to the Senate staff because they're really great. And then, as I mentioned, we do broadcast. We've got 3 cameras. Today we have a really amazing group of film professionals with us. Justin Brager has been leading the effort with Jeff, who's the front cameraman here in the front. But today we've also got Sam Ebersol and Scott Jones. So if you watched the Rocky Mountain PBS documentary recently on the flood, Justin and Sam were really part of that kind of duo team to make that film really what it was. But Scott has, it's another legendary legacy figure here that we have in Pueblo. So we're really fortunate to have these resources. And just to mention something that happened yesterday, the Colorado Office of Film, Television, and Media met with the Pueblo Film Commission, and we had over 40 people at this meeting. And they were filmmakers, they were storytellers, they were doing commercial work, they were doing reality TV, they were doing documentaries, they were doing just about everything. And then we had the Chamber of Commerce there. But what we're trying to do is to get the city of Pueblo, and PEDCO is now going to be hearing our white paper, which will identify content creation as an industry sector. So just like they do for healthcare, for transportation, content creation is the fastest growing industry in the world. So there's no reason for Pueblo not to take advantage of that. And there's also a really big announcement tomorrow, which is truly embargoed. So at 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, there will be a big global announcement, and Pueblo literally will be on the international map. So I cannot say anything more than that, but stay tuned. It is huge news. And with that, I'm so excited to have Jane Fraser with us this evening. I got to know Jane, I think almost immediately when she started Pueblo Makes. Which, and I'll be really honest with you, I don't like meetings very much because I don't need a free lunch to get things done. I really like to just hit the sidewalk and make ideas turn into action. And when I went to Jane's first meeting, which she held up at the university in the engineering department, there were probably about 40 people sitting around this huge conference table. But when I looked around the room, it was like all the thought leaders. It was like all of the people that could really make change happen. And it was from education to industry to the private sector, the public sector, government. It was everyone there. And I'm going to let Jane tell you all about it. But Pueblo Makes is really one of those umbrella organizations that really does what an umbrella organization is supposed to do. So, as I do with every week, I'm just going to read a little bit of Jane's bio. Jane Fraser was a professor of engineering for 40 years, most recently serving as chair of the Department of Engineering at CSU-Pueblo. She has a PhD in engineering from the University of California at Berkeley, my school too, and a Bachelor of Arts in Mathematics from Swarthmore College. She is enjoying retirement by keeping busy as the treasurer of the Boys and Girls Clubs Board, the treasurer of the Southern Colorado Economic Development District Board, the secretary of the 2030 Commission, and a member of Pueblo's Energy Future. She really isn't retired at all. She convenes the group Pueblo Makes. She and her partner, Mark Weber, live 10 miles down a dirt road on 53 acres in Hatchet Ranch. So with no further ado, you've got the floor, Jane. Thanks.
Thank you, Gregory. My ancestor, John Gentle, was a shoemaker in Glasgow, Scotland, and deacon of the Guild of Shoemakers in 1808. His father-in-law, 2 of his sons, and 1 grandson were also shoemakers. My ancestors, Robert Walker, his father Robert, and his father James, were engravers and map makers in Edinburgh, Scotland. James's wife, Janet Murray, was the daughter of a baker. My ancestors, Samuel Stevenson and his wife, Cicely Miller, made quack medicine in Edinburgh, Scotland. Cicely stole the recipe from her former employer. She actually served jail time for her activities. My mother's paternal grandfather was an architect in England. His son, my grandfather, came to the United States in 1916, and he too was an architect in Brooklyn. My mother's maternal grandfather, born in Canada, came to the United States in 1887 and was a carpenter in Brooklyn. He made the box that holds the creche scene on the right. My father's father was a tailor in Glasgow, Scotland. When the family came to New York City in 1923, my grandfather was a tailor for Mayor Jimmy Walker, at least according to the family legend. The photo on the right shows my father playing golf in Scotland in trousers that his father made. My father's mother made Scottish shortbread to die for. The recipe called for a pound of butter, a pound of rice flour, and a cup of sugar. My father was the first in his family to go to college. He was, in fact, the first in his family to go to high school. He became an engineer. He was one of the chief engineers on the first transatlantic telephone cable and one of the developers of the first multiplexing system. He also built a 2-car garage on the house that I grew up in. But the maker with the most influence on me was my mother, who taught me to sew. She made the Easter outfit she is wearing in this photo, as well as the outfits worn by her 2 daughters. No extra points for guessing which daughter is me. And by the way, these ancestors raised amazing women. I became a professor of engineering. My cousin's daughter, with a PhD in molecular genetics, is a high-level administrator at the University of Glasgow in Scotland and an accomplished photographer. Another cousin is the director of regulatory affairs at a large medical company. And my sister, Carol Fraser Fisk, was a US Commissioner on Aging in the Reagan administration. So why have I given you all this family history? What are you thinking at this point? Well, you may be thinking, Jane, I knew you were white, but I had no idea you were that white. And it is indeed true. I have been raised, I'm descended from many very white people. In fact, I recently submitted my DNA on a website that claims that I have Viking DNA. I don't think you can get more white than Viking, can you? But I hope, as I talked about the makers in my past, shoemakers, map makers, quack medicine makers, architects, tailors, and bakers, and my mother who taught me to sew, I hope you were thinking and saying to yourself, my ancestors were makers too. I know makers. I have makers in my family. I'm a maker. Whether in Pueblo or elsewhere, I hope you were thinking about making and makers in Pueblos, present and past. Pueblo is a maker city. Pueblo makes. It has deep maker roots. That's an identity for Pueblo. That's my point tonight. And if you start to nod off or want to spend some time on your drink or on your food, that's the point. So you can talk about this later on. Remember that point. Making is an identity for Pueblo. Pueblo makes. First, I'm going to talk about some makers in Pueblo's present, some of our manufacturing companies, and of course, I'm going to start with steel. I'm going to start with we'll get through. There we go. Steel is on the previous one. There we go. Thank you. Okay. I think Sam is saving me there. Evraz makes steel. They fabricate that steel into rail, seamless pipe, rod, and coiled rebar. Vestas, now CS Wind, makes the towers for wind turbines. Trane makes industrial chillers. Collins Aerospace makes carbon disc brakes. PWAG makes traction. PWAG makes traction chains for trucks. Craig Manufacturing is a sheet metal fabrication company. Agalite makes shower and bath enclosures. United Launch Alliance fabricates and tests equipment for space launch vehicles. TTCI, the Transportation Technology Center Incorporated, does research, testing, development, and training for the rail industry worldwide. Atlas Pacific now Gulfco Manufacturing, makes food handling equipment, especially for fruit. Trinity Plastics makes branded plastic bags. TR Toppers make dessert toppings. Kurt Manufacturing makes machined metal parts. Westwind Wood Specialties makes custom cabinet doors. And Active Armor makes personalized 3D casts and splints. I could go on with more industrial companies. L.B. Foster and Progressive Rail make products for the rail industry. J.M. Eagle makes plastic pipe. Johnny's Boiler Shop makes metal parts. Kirby Fiberglass makes fiberglass mops and brushes for applying roofing material. IndieDwell makes houses. Summit Brick makes bricks and other masonry products and more. But now I'm going to tell you a little bit about Pueblo's past, their maker past. Some history you may know, but some history I think you won't know. These stories draw from a series of articles that the Chieftain published in 1897 and 1898. The Meade hay press, a baling machine, was patented by Marvin Meade, formerly of Monte Vista, in June 1895. The manufacturing plant was at 109-111 West 3rd Street. The parts were all made from steel from the Bessemer Steel Works. The Lannon Foundry in Pueblo did the casting, and the wood came from Beulah. The only parts not made in Pueblo County were a 30-inch spring and the iron wheels. I'm sure you're aware that Pueblo had several saddle companies. SC Gallup and RT Fraser were in business at 188 West 3rd Street. In 1897, the chieftain said they had been in business together 26 years and employed 23 leather workers. In 1897, the Colorado Bedding Company was located on Summit, north of 8th Street, with 2 warehouses elsewhere in Pueblo. They made several kinds of mattresses, including the Ives mattress, the invention of Henry C. Ives of Pueblo, which was made without tufts or twine. The chieftain reported excelsior, wool, moss, pine fiber, African fiber, which I think is aloe, cotton, and hair are the principal materials used for filling, and they are imported in bales in carload lots and then prepared. Max Kohn, the owner and manager of the company, came from Austria in 1850. This photo is from the March 2015 issue of the newsletter of the Pueblo Downtown Association. Owens Boiler Shops, owned by George W. Owens and located on the northeast corner of 8th and Court, now the parking lot for the Wells Fargo Bank, made boilers as well as making repairs and doing other metal work. The chieftain said one of the largest boilers built at the shop was 15 feet in diameter and 16 feet long for the Pueblo Waterworks, corner of 4th Street and Grand Avenue, which is where they still are. By 1901, when the chieftain wrote again about the company, it had become the Iron City Boiler Works and employed 50 men. The most competent mechanics only are employed, and they are under the supervision of trained and skilled foremen. So thoroughly is the work done and the supervision directed in every detail that the works have never in their history turned out a boiler that has failed to stand the test of the inspector after the final and last rivet was driven. The 1900 census shows that Mr. Owens was born in Illinois to parents from England, and his wife was from Sweden. They had 2 children as well as 5 lodgers. The Pueblo Soap Company, owned by Charles W. Mills and Charles L. Burrell, was located at Grand and Victoria. That's just up Grand Avenue from where we are right now. I enjoyed the detailed descriptions in many of these articles, and I'm sure you can't read that, but it describes the process, some of the process that was used to make the product. They also bragged about the fact that they locally sourced all their inputs to the process. According to an article in the Chieftain, Mr. Mills had played varsity football at Yale. I also liked the ad for the lost dog, which I hope was found. Also, an ad I don't show up there showed that the Cruz Beggs Cooperative Dry Goods Store sold their laundry soap. The Pueblo Trunk Factory was located at 231 North Union Avenue, just outside the door here, roughly where the Sister City Plaza is now. It was owned by Joe Straub, Robert Cowles, and George Loomis. I think that the owner, Joe Straub, was the first professional baseball player from Pueblo. He played from 1880 to 1883. He was born in Wisconsin with parents from Germany and died in Pueblo. He's buried in Roseland Cemetery. The Newton Lumber Company, headquartered in Pueblo and operating all over Colorado and New Mexico, owned land and sawmills throughout the area. It was founded by George A. Newton in 1871. His brother Whitney Newton joined him in 1883 and took over the company when George died in 1892. Their offices were at 4th and Court. This snippet mentions some brickyards that they also use, and I think if you look at the location of that, that's where Summit Brick is now, across the fountain. The Newton Lumber Company seems to have had a very inventive advertising department. On the left, on the top, that's an ad that's in Italian language, and that was in a Pueblo newspaper that published only in Italian. The ad below that is in, I am told, Slovenian, and again was in a Pueblo newspaper that was published in the Slovenian language. The 3 ads on the right were from the Chieftain, and those, I think, are very catchy headlines. How could you not read those ads? I don't think you can see the one on the bottom, maybe here. It's titled "Ye Olden Times Would Be Complete If We Had the Good Old Sure Booze as We Have the Cut Prices at Newton Lumber Company." So that one was during Prohibition. They made various metal parts. They also made and sold bicycles, also rubber stamps and seals, as well as keys. Let's see. This is the Pueblo Novelty Works, which was founded by George Avery in 1889, and they moved around a bit. Let me give you some addresses. They were founded in the basement of 237 North Union Avenue, moved to 223 North Santa Fe, then 114 Main Street, finally to 140 West First Street, which is, I think, where the Marriott is now. Partly, I'm giving you these addresses also to show you it was all clustered right in this area where we sit right now. I could go on, and this is the list from the Chieftain articles that they published in 1897 and 1898. There are 23 in that list, and I haven't covered even half of them. It was fascinating to delve into these and just see the richness of the manufacturing. I'll just mention one more article from the Chieftain, which was titled Industrial Pueblo Without a Single Pier. The article mentioned agricultural produce, including a flour mill, packing houses, orchards, gardens, dairies, bee farms, a tannery, wool from sheep, clothing manufacture, woodworking establishment, Holmes Hardware, the Standard Fire Brick Company, and more, to make its case that Pueblo made or could make everything needed by its citizens should it be cut off from the rest of the world. Earlier in this series of talks, Peggy Wilcox talked about events in Pueblo's history and their echoes today. I hear a lot of echoes, very positive in this history. People from many ethnic backgrounds lived in Pueblo or came to Pueblo, established businesses, and made a great success. I've emphasized our industrial makers, but we have other makers. Monique Mares of the Pueblo Food Project talked about our agricultural makers, including, she said, 839 family farms. I'll mention some other agricultural makers: Mission Foods, Muso Farms, Los Sueños, Springside Cheese, Solar Roast, Seppi's Kosher Breads, and more. Pueblo grows chili peppers. I could also list our brewers: Brews, Shamrock Brewing, Walters. Andy Sanchez spoke in this series about the making of beer by the Walter family. I could list other makers: Formulary 55 and the Colorado Center for Metal Arts. We have our artists in the Pueblo Arts Alliance, artists painting the Levy mural, quilters in our several quilt guilds. We have people who customize cars. But now I'm going to turn from an emphasis on industrial makers, present and past, to take a different view of making, a more personal view. At the recent IdeaCon, sponsored by the Pueblo Library, I asked people, what do you make? And here are some of their answers. They said pies, dice jewelry, wire jewelry, masks, hundreds, voodoo dolls, piñatas, aprons, herbal remedies, quilts. They also said crochet, knitting, drawing, dance, community, heavy-duty sewing, and smiles. Dr. Kelly Gelhoff said she makes garden dreams. Here's another view of more of what they wrote. Jackie said she makes trouble. Other people said drinks, macrames, sugary treats, eggplant, heart connection, and cabinets. They also said drawing, cosplay, weird stuff, and mechanic. Orale, who wrote in the bottom in red here, said he makes sopapillas, fideos, sirloin steak in my air fryer. I said, I'll be right over. Pueblo has a wealth of makers. Making is an identity for Pueblo in the present in a very personal way. Obviously, I'm very inclusive in what I call a maker. I started with manufacturing companies, past and present, but I also include Orale, who makes sopapillas, and Kelly, who makes garden dreams. What do all these makers have in common? What does it mean to be a maker? There's a national movement to support makers, and in 2013, Mark Hatch published a book called The Maker Movement Manifesto. He used 9 verbs to describe what makers do, and I'm going to read you what he said about each verb because he said it very well. First, make. Making is fundamental to what it means to be human. We must make, create, and express ourselves to feel whole. There is something unique about making physical things. These things are like little pieces of us that seem to embody portions of our souls. Sharing is what you have made, sharing what you have made and what you know about making with others is the method by which a maker's feeling of wholeness is achieved. You cannot make and not share. There are a few things about more selfless and satisfying than giving away something you made. The act of making puts a small piece of you in the object. Giving that to someone else is like giving someone a small piece of yourself. Such things are often the most cherished items we possess. You must learn to make. You must always seek to learn more about your making. You may become a journeyman or master craftsman, but you will still learn, want to learn, and push yourself to learn new techniques, materials, and processes. Building a lifelong learning path ensures a rich and rewarding making life, and most importantly, enables one to share. You must have access to the right tools for the project at hand. Invest in and develop local access to the tools you need to do the making you want to do. The tools of making have never been cheaper, easier to use, or more powerful. Be playful with what you are making, and you will be surprised, excited, and proud of what you discover. Join the maker movement and reach out to those around you who are discovering the joy of making. Hold seminars, parties, events, maker days, fairs, expos, classes, and dinners with and for the other makers in your community. This is a movement, and it requires emotional, intellectual, financial, political, and institutional support. The best hope for improving the world is us, and we are responsible for making a better future. And finally, change. Embrace the change that will naturally occur as you go through your maker journey. Since making is fundamental to what it means to be human, you will become a more complete version of you as you make. With all that background, the present and the past of making in Pueblo, the variety of makers in Pueblo, and knowledge of the maker movement, we, Kurt Maddock and I, called a meeting in March 2018. Gregory was there, although I remember that there were very few people in the room, but they were the vital people for sure. We created the group Pueblo Makes. We meet monthly. We're an informal network. We meet and talk, and good things happen. Connections get made. Our Facebook page has over 500 likes, and there are over 150 people on the mailing list. I'm going to show you some of the people who are involved in Pueblo Makes, and some of them are in the room here too. Susan Finzel and Alice Hill of the I Will Project have introduced local school children to aquaponics through a grant funded by NASA and involving the Boys and Girls Clubs. Drew Hershon and Meryl Sarper from PSAS Fulton Heights teach making to middle school students. Gregory Howell of Water Tower Place, Emily Gradisar of TikTok, Makerspace librarian Sharon Rice, inventor Lane Maxwell, seamstress Ladoris Burton of Designs by Ladoris at Project Inspire at PDI, Elliot Ring, who makes music, Kathy and Jim Valenzuela, Kathy of Tuxedo Ranch, Russ Dewey and Lois Fost from the Pueblo Woodturners, Karen Fogelsong and Cynthia Ramu from the Pueblo Arts Alliance, Professor Neb Jaksic from CSU-Pueblo Department of Engineering, Jason Falsetto and Joey Matthews from PCC, Tom Carrigan from the Human Rights Commission, Paula Robin from the SPDC, City Clerk Marissa Stoller, Bill Thomas from EJB Associates, Zach Collier, who worked with me to trademark the phrase Pueblo Makes, Tim Roush, who really knows how to 3D print things, Pat Montoya of Before You Forget Films, Becky Medina from the Boys and Girls Club, Ana Luz and Arturo Castañon of Colibri Glass. And Ana Luz just taught me that colibri means hummingbird in Spanish. Thank you. Ina Bernard from Artisan Textile, Wyatt Ferris from Train, and more. You thought I wasn't going to stop. On the next slide, I'm going to show you Paula Robin led us in a visioning exercise for Pueblo Makes. Thank you to her. And here's the vision of what Pueblo Makers said they want Pueblo Makes to do. They want us to invite people in, educate people about Pueblo's culture of making, create a sense of community that nurtures the soul. I've used that word a couple of times tonight. Create the help that people need, promote the abundance of makers, creatives, artists, and entrepreneurs in Pueblo. Involve the kids, curate spaces and tools. I have 2 slides left. The next slide is a piece I wrote a few years back about making. And Gregory asked me to make sure to use this tonight. I grew up in a paper mill town in New Jersey. And after I came to Pueblo 20 years ago, it took me a while to figure out why I felt at home so quickly. I realized that Pueblo has the same ethnic blue-collar diversity, the same friendly but tough welcome, and the same hands-on, we can do this attitude of my hometown. Both are maker towns. Pueblo makes steel, but we also roast coffee, we design and make jewelry, we customize hot rods, and we paint murals. We have great manufacturing companies that make carbon disc brakes for aircraft, towers for wind turbines, traction chains, rail products, custom kitchen cabinet doors, fruit handling equipment, bath and body products, and more. I sew. My final thought for you, what is the Pueblo question when 2 people from Pueblo meet each other for the first time? What do they ask each other? What high school did you go to? Let's change that question to, what do you make? Thank you for listening. I'm happy to take your questions, to hear your comments, your stories about your makers, and your answers to this question. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. And thank you for that essay that Jane wrote several years ago. I have used it time and time again, but it really just kind of showed, and I love how you actually not only watched all the videos, but you also referenced many of them in your presentation. And I think that's what the dig is all about, because there is a common thread, and that's the one thing that we hope to do at the end of the 15th session. We're already putting the book together, but it will be volume 1, the dig, almost like, like a college reader or a school reader, but it will be a collection of all the presentations. And you'll also be able to get all of the audio, if you just want the audio, and also the video we already have on YouTube. But thank you for threading that all together so nicely, and for including, I told Jane, you have to include that essay. And I think we're gonna give you a t-shirt, that says Pueblo Makes, and then on the back it'll have the whole essay, so. But do we have any questions? I love the fact that I've only been in Pueblo 10 years, and of course I was confronted with that same question. What high school did you graduate from? Well, of course, I didn't graduate. So I remember us having this conversation. What could we ask as a secondary question to be more inclusive? Because that has always been, from the outset, one of the goals of Pueblo Makes is to be very, very inclusive. So what do you make? So questions? Any questions?
Tell me about your makers. Zach.
There goes Zach. We should just ask everyone, what do you make?
Oh, Zach makes interesting stuff. Yeah.
Is your essay published? Do you have it out on your blog or somewhere else?
No. Gregory's got it up somewhere. Oh, it was in.
The whole, when we had the very first meeting, Jane wrote it, it's in the Water Tower Place magazine.
Yeah.
That's when we first did it, when we had that first tour at Water Tower Place. And that was the first place we published it. But it's going to be published in other places too.
All right.
So I'll tell you, Zach makes internet tools, security tools, really high-end, very interesting stuff. And he's going to have some new products out soon, he tells me. So
He does all the hard work for us too at Pueblo Makes. So.
yeah, he does.
And he knows Reddit better than anyone on this planet. Any other questions? Yeah.
I think one area and person you might add to the kind of the industrial list is Ken Williams and all the artistic sculpture and work that he does, because they've done a lot of large projects over the years.
I couldn't catch all of that. Art project? Yeah.
You know, Ken Williams Studios, which is next to
Oh,
Muso's.
yeah.
And of course, for those that have been watching the Dillon flyover, there's one of his
Yeah.
towers, but if you go to the 4th Street Bridge, but he's everywhere. He's prolifically, not only just all over Pueblo. I tried to rescue one that was at the Cherry, what is it, up in Denver, the Cherry Creek Mall. They were redoing one section, and his wife actually designed this one. Sadly, we were not able to save it, and they actually tore it down, and it went away. But no, Ken Williams, I mean, we're so fortunate. Summit Brook, but Ken Williams Studio, and now Brooke is doing such amazing things with the studio. So another generation is going to be taking it over.
You know, that's what's so embarrassing when I talk about this, is I'm always going to leave out some really significant makers in this town, and they're fantastic. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Tell me about your
I
makers.
may come around and just ask what people make. I mean, I felt really included. I'm supposed to get over here towards the camera when I speak, but no, that was really a hard thing to get used to when everyone, I felt like I was never in the club because I wasn't from Central, I wasn't from Centennial, I wasn't from East or South, but I realized very quickly that above and beyond that, everyone did share something very unique. And this notion of making is a very, very powerful, and even more so, I think, now, because when you kind of are forced to isolate or be more reliant on what you can do yourself, it's pretty powerful. What Puebloans can do, rolling up their sleeves, this can-do attitude, which I'm very proud of.
Ask Dora Luce to speak about making.
Well, Ana Luz, I mean, the story of Ana Luz is amazing because her family, 5 generations now, glass, and I've always been a huge fan of glass, but the story starting in Europe and then coming to the United States and then ending up in actually Puebla, which is the sister city for Pueblo, and then, I mean, the story is incredible, but Ana Luz's family is actually, and we hope to do another generation. This will be the 4th year or the 5th year. 4th year, we do these hand-designed, hand-blown Christmas ornaments that we do, a limited edition. But that's something that we've been collaborating with, and that's what is really fun because we can put our resources together. So, but again, you know, glass is one of those traditions that's passed down through families from Europe all the way through the United States and down to Mexico, and the plants are still in Mexico City. So, any other questions? Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily, and I make things with lasers. I have a question, and since you've got your fingers in so many pies in terms of making, for people who are listening who might not be involved in maker communities already, what would be your advice for places to start for them to look at?
Yeah, good question, Emily. No, and of course, thank you. That's a great opportunity for me to plug Pueblo Makes. I can take that right here. On your table, there are cards for Pueblo Makes, and if you want to be on the mailing list for it, my address is on there. We've got more cards if you run out also. But Emily, you know, and I think also a great place to start making is the library. Sharon Rice isn't here tonight. She's our makerspace librarian. And if you've noticed, the library has all sorts of stuff blocked off, and they're starting to do their revamping. It's still the new library building to me, but it's been there quite a while, right? One of the things they're going to do is when you come in the main entrance on the left where the children's area has been, that's going to be turned into a makerspace. There already is a makerspace upstairs, but it's going to be moved downstairs to make it much more accessible. It's going to be about 5 times the size of what it was. And there are awesome classes, and Sharon runs things for all ages, free. I mean, you can go in and you can make there, you can try things out. We actually have quite a few maker spaces. We have a group that's trying to list all of those. Clay making, paint and bubbly, you can go paint and drink some wine while you're doing it. And so there's quite a few opportunities. Thank you, Emily.
And the library, too, it's 5,000 square feet. And what's nice and what Jane was referring to and what Emily with TikTok, and we're excited, we can't wait for TikTok to open at Central Plaza. But what Jane was just mentioning is there already is this existing ecosystem, shall we say. And the one thing that we were trying to do is, you know, you really can't have just one makerspace. We realized there were a lot of different makerspaces for different things. And what's nice about the library is this new facility, 5,000 square feet. Yeah. And I'm so proud of Sharon Rice because she actually fought for and got every single thing she wanted for this space. I give the library a lot of credit because their capital campaign, they already had $12 million, I think, and they only needed $13 million. That's pretty impressive. But what's going to happen is that makerspace will be designated as an entry-level makerspace. And that's really important because there's a lot of other makerspaces that specialize in other areas. One thing that we're trying to do at Water Tower Place, we work with a lot of entrepreneurs, but we also have Johnny's Boiler Shop, which is a steel fabrication center. That is not an entry-level makerspace. So what we're trying to do is develop this kind of mapping of an ecosystem so that you can find that right space where you actually fit. And I know Emily, from moving from TikTok to Central Plaza, she's going to have a lot of really nice specialty areas, workshops, and continuing what she's already done. But there's quite a few, from metal to steel fabrication to textiles. I mean, Project Inspire at PDI is another example of a space on the south side where they're actually doing some amazing collaborations with potters, with seamstresses, with fashion designers, with tin and copper, coppersmiths. I mean, there's some really, and then the wood turners. Yeah. I go to the monthly wood turner meetings on the south side, and they have guest speakers from all over the world. And I thought wood turning was just wood turning, but it's so much more. So it's really exciting to see how. And I would highly recommend, in response to your question too, Mark Hatch, who Jane mentioned, the Maker Manifesto, is an amazing little tiny book. You can download it on the internet, but it really does dial into what this maker movement is all about. And Jane, that was brilliant in terms of, I'm a verb person, I like action words, and it was really nice to see those. So, any other questions? If there are no questions, next week, we have the team in the back. We've got Sam Ebersol and Justin Brager, who are going to present next week the making of the documentary. So this is the team that is really responsible with leading the creation of the Rocky Mountain PBS documentary on the Great Flood. And so I'm curious to see how that's all going to unfold. I understand Scott Jones is going to be there, Jeff will be there, so they'll probably be running back and forth. But it'll be exciting because it'll be an interactive, the making of the documentary. So if there are no other questions, I want to thank everyone. There's still some food up here. And if you need a drink coupon, just come and grab me and enjoy the rest of the night. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.